Welcome back, you night owls tonight. We are peeling back the rice paper thin veil on one of history's most unnerving, yet deeply sacred, rites. I'm talking about the Sokushinbutsu, the self-mummified monks of Japan. Now, close your eyes, if you dare, and picture this with me. You're not scrolling on your phone. You are in the deep, freezing quiet of Japan's Dewa-Sanzan Mountains, specifically Mount Udono. The air is so sharp it feels like you're inhaling shards of ice, and the only light comes from a single oil lamp flickering inside a small, ancient temple hut. You're bundled up in rough, hand-woven robes, but the cold still seeps into your very bones. Outside, the great cedar and beech trees stand like silent, hooded sentinels, covered in a blanket of snow that muffles the world until it's just the sound of your own shallow breath. You've come here, to this sacred, punishing landscape, for one reason: to consciously, ritually, and slowly end your life in a state of perfect preservation. This isn't just about dying. It's about becoming something more than human, something eternal. You are dedicating yourself to a horrifying path to enlightenment, and you probably won't survive this process statistically. Most who tried didn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the cold stone floor beneath your knees. You've just arrived, an acolyte committed to the most extreme form of Buddhist asceticism, known largely to practitioners of Shugendo, the mountain-dwelling tradition. This practice isn't some casual meditation retreat. It is a meticulously planned, multi-year suicide mission, designed to transform your physical body into a relic, a mummy, while your soul achieves a final state of Buddhahood. This is the ultimate expression of the belief that you, through intense physical suffering, can become a living Buddha. The first, immediate lesson you receive is about the sheer scale of the commitment. The process is famously divided into 3 phases, each lasting 1,000 days. That's roughly 9 years, if you make it, which, let me tell you, is a massive if. Phase 1 is all about drying out the body, reducing fat and eliminating moisture. Phase 2 involves the consumption of natural toxins to act as a permanent embalming agent. And Phase 3, well, that's when you seal yourself in the ground to die. Tonight, you are only staring down the barrel of Phase 1, a 3-year commitment to self-starvation and suffering. You recall the initial briefing. The body, in its natural state, is too plump, too moist, too full of life to properly mummify. It's basically a giant, well-stocked pantry for bacteria and insects. Your mission? To make yourself profoundly unappetizing. As you settle into your humble cell, the history of this mountain wraps around you like a chill shroud. Historians still argue whether the practice of Sokushinbutsu evolved organically from the Shugendo tradition's rigorous mountain penance, or whether it was directly influenced by similar, though less formalized, self-mummification rites observed in other parts of Asia, perhaps filtering through Chen. Either way, this mountain is steeped in its own specific, powerful history. You remember hearing that the earliest documented instances of this practice date back to the Heian period 794–1185, making it a truly ancient, albeit geographically isolated, phenomenon. The quirky or fringe tidbit you keep turning over in your mind, something one of the older monks whispered, is about Kukai, the founder of Shingon Buddhism. Though not a Sokushinbutsu himself, Kukai is said to have entered an eternal meditative state, Nujo, in his tomb in the 9th century, with his disciples believing he is merely sleeping, waiting for the future Buddha, Maitreya. This belief, that a great master can voluntarily hold onto a state of suspended animation, gave powerful spiritual justification for your much more corporeal undertaking. You're not just trying to die. You're trying to achieve Kukai's state, but with the added layer of physical preservation. It gives you a moment of dark humor. You're essentially aiming for the most extreme long-term nap in history. Hopefully, no one wakes me up on a Monday, you think, giving yourself a small, nervous smile in the dark. Your first official task is simple, but symbolically loaded. You must choose and mark the small plot of ground where, years from now, your final, sealed chamber will rest. You trudge out into the snow, the moonlight catching the crystals like tiny indifferent diamonds, The earth here is frozen solid, but you know that come spring, a small stone box, your tomb will be buried here. This quiet, mainstream historical fact is a powerful one. The monks who practiced this were almost exclusively associated with a specific mountain range and a specific branch of Buddhism, mostly the Dewa Sanzan Mountains, comprised of Mount Haguro, Mount Gassen, and Mount Udono. This mountain isolation was not incidental. The harsh, mineral-rich environment and the specific ascetic rules of the temples here were deemed essential ingredients for the ritual's success. You're not just in a cold place, you're in the correct cold place. You find a suitable spot, slightly sheltered by a cluster of ancient cedars, and drive a small, lacquered wooden stake into the ground. As you look at the marker, you realize the enormity of the next 3 years. Your first year, the focus is simple. Eliminate grains. No rice, no barley, no wheat. Your diet, instead, will be entirely made up of foraging the mountain. Think about that for a second. You're not going low carb or keto. You're going literally zero carb and mostly raw roots. This shift is the first, agonizing step in draining the reserves from your body. The goal is to strip away the easy energy, the comfort, the very fuel that allows your body to thrive. Without starches, your body is forced to start burning its own fat, a process that will rapidly transform your physique. You return to your hut, the cold feeling less like a temporary discomfort and more like a permanent resident. You pick up a small, weathered book of chants. Your mind, for the first time, begins to grapple with the contradiction at the heart of your choice. You are actively trying to destroy your body in the service of a higher, eternal form of existence. You are trading comfort for preservation, life for an unending vigil in the dark. You are essentially signing up for the most extreme and prolonged juice cleanse in human history. Only the juice is roots, and the cleanse ends in death. The journey has begun, and tonight, you just try to sleep. The cold stone your mattress, and the mountains shadow your blanket. You wake before the sun, the cold of the previous night having settled deep inside your chest. The small room offers no reprieve. It's a constant, bone-chilling reminder of the task ahead. Today, the 3-year dietary clock officially starts. You are entering the first 1,000-day phase. Taimatsu no Gyo, or the grain exclusion training. No more comforting bowls of rice porridge, no steaming, starchy goodness. The kitchen of the main temple, which you are now forbidden to truly share meals with, smells tantalizingly of miso and the faint, sweet steam of cooked grains. But that life is now irrevocably behind you. Your new diet is the mountain itself. You are now a dedicated forager, relying entirely on the wild harvest of nuts, roots, bark, and specific berries found high in these isolated peaks. You tie a rough sack to your waist and head out, your stomach already grumbling a low, persistent protest that you know will become the soundtrack to your life for years. The purpose here is twofold. Firstly, stripping the body of starches forces it to enter a state of severe ketosis, burning fat reserves. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly for the mummification, you are aiming to minimize the gut flora. Grains and sugars feed the bacteria in your digestive system, the very things that will cause rapid decomposition post-mortem. By eliminating them, you are starting the slow, internal purge. You are sterilizing yourself from the inside out. You spend the morning digging. The ground is still hard, but you've been taught the specific spots where certain roots, tough, bitter, and low in starch, can be found. You discover a patch of wild yam, but you must meticulously wash and prepare it to ensure you avoid any toxic varieties. The nuts, primarily chestnuts and acorns, require laborious shelling and often lengthy leaching in water to remove their bitter tannins, a process that is exhausting and takes valuable time. Your daily caloric intake plummets almost instantly. You are consuming perhaps a quarter of what a normal person needs, and you are doing heavy physical labor to acquire it. It's a vicious, self-defeating cycle that is, paradoxically, the exact point of the practice. The quirky tidbit you were told by the abbot upon your commitment was about the surprising role of sesame seeds. While technically a seed and a source of some fat, they were often consumed in ground form, not for calories, but for a specific symbolic function. These monks believed that the tiny black specks, representing the myriad aspects of reality, would pass through the body essentially undigested, acting as a final, earthy material to be incorporated into the preserved corpse. It's an oddly poetic thought. You are incorporating the very earth into your body. making your final form less flesh and more mineral. You wonder if this is why your stomach churns so persistently it's trying to digest the cosmos. Well, if nothing else, I'm getting a lot of fiber, you mutter to a disinterested squirrel, trying to inject a little modern sarcasm into your ancient predicament. As the weeks turn into months, your body begins to protest in earnest. The initial energy spike of adrenaline gives way to profound, crushing fatigue. Historians still argue whether the monk's commitment to this phase of extreme calorie restriction was primarily spiritual, aimed at achieving detachment from the body, or fundamentally practical, driven by the necessary biological demands of mummification. Most scholars now agree it was a potent combination. The physical suffering was the path to spiritual purity, Buddhahood, but the result of the suffering, rapid weight loss and dehydration, was the prerequisite for mummification. You feel this duality acutely as you trudge back to your hut, your legs feeling like lead pipes. Every step is a devotional act, but also a brutal mechanical failure. You notice the mainstream historical fact that few people outside the monasteries realize the extent of the suffering. The local villagers, who often venerated these yamabushi, mountain priests, knew they practiced rigorous asceticism, but the specific, multi-year plan for self-mummification was a tightly guarded monastic secret. This secrecy was partly to prevent people from trying to emulate the practice without the necessary discipline and ritual knowledge, and partly due to the fact that, at various points in history, this form of ritual suicide was frowned upon, or even banned by central authorities. This knowledge of being an unseen pioneer, a participant in a hidden ritual, gives a strange, solitary pride. You are performing the ultimate sacrifice not for public applause, but for the eternity of the Dharma. Your appearance begins to change dramatically. Your face, which once had a youthful plumpness, now looks drawn and hollow. Your cheekbones and eye sockets become sharply defined. Your muscles begin to atrophy, the strength you once took for granted slowly dissolving. You no longer walk with a confident stride. You shuffle, trying to conserve every precious calorie. You develop a constant, low-grade headache, and your dreams become strangely vivid and confusing, a common symptom of malnutrition. The world takes on a slightly fuzzy quality at the edges, and your sense of smell becomes intensely heightened. You can smell the coming snow, the dampness of the earth, and, most disturbingly, the faint, acrid smell of your own body chemistry changing. One day, you are gathering acorns by a small, frigid stream. You slip on a wet rock and instinctively grab a tree root to catch yourself, wrenching your shoulder. The pain is immediate and intense, but your reaction is surprisingly muted. You simply sit down, breathe, and wait for the spasm to pass. This is a crucial, if light, joke. The old you would have been swearing and complaining for an hour, demanding ice. The new you just accepts the pain as part of the ritual furniture, a mild inconvenience in the larger process of self-destruction. The mountain is an unforgiving tutor. It teaches you that physical discomfort is not an enemy to be fought, but a companion to be endured. You mend the injury with quiet stoicism, realizing that your body, once a source of pleasure and strength, is now just a vessel to be emptied and dried. You are becoming a ghost before you are a corpse. As the first year begins to near its end, the mental clarity you were promised by the monks starts to break through the fog of hunger. When your body is not distracted by the demands of rich, complex digestion, your mind becomes singularly focused. The great philosophical questions no longer seem abstract. They are as real as the ache in your knees. You have stripped away the noise of the world and, in doing so, are beginning to hear the quiet hum of your own inner self. The transformation is terrifying, but it is undeniably profound. You are 300 days closer to the stone box, 300 days deeper into your final slow sleep. The turn of the first 1,000 days marks a change so subtle, yet so catastrophic for your body, that it feels less like a new phase, and more like a descent into an internal desert. You have survived the first major hurdle of grain exclusion, but now, you escalate the assault. You are moving into the second phase of dietary restriction, sometimes called the Kigyo Zanmai, or the wood-eating samadhi. If the first phase was about emptying your fuel tank, this one is about actively drying out the engine. Your diet now focuses relentlessly on materials with extremely low nutritional value and high fiber content. Pine needles, tree bark, and roots that have been baked or boiled to a rubbery consistency. You no longer forage for nourishment, you forage for desiccation. Pine needles, particularly those from specific indigenous species, are your new staple. Chewing them is an exercise in endurance. They are bitter, resinous, and scratch the back of your throat, often causing minor internal bleeding. You chew them slowly, painstakingly, breaking down the tough cellulose fibers. This is the ultimate detox, designed not just to eliminate fat, but to actively absorb and flush out remaining bodily fluids. The goal is to eliminate almost all remaining body moisture. Your skin, once supple, is now parchment thin and tightly stretched over your frame. When you press your finger to your forearm, the indentation remains for a slow, worrying moment. You are chronically dehydrated, and though you are allowed a controlled amount of water, you consciously limit it, recognizing the spiritual need for suffering and the practical need to dry out your eventual mummy. You are trying to become a husk while still breathing. The historical mainstream fact that validates this bizarre diet is the crucial role of water content in successful preservation. Every successful Sokushinbutsu found has exhibited extremely low water content, and this diet was the primary, non-surgical means of achieving it. High water content, coupled with body fat, is what fuels the decomposition process, the breakdown of cells, and the activity of putrefying bacteria. By drastically lowering both, you are creating an environment inside your body that is inhospitable to decay. You are performing preventative embalming, using nothing but the mountain's meager bounty. You find yourself drawn to the quirky tidbit that the specific type of bark used was often from the Japanese black pine, kuromatsu, not only for its low nutritional content, but because its resin has mild antiseptic properties. Monks believed this resin helped to cleanse the inner organs, a sort of natural internal soap. You boil strips of this bark repeatedly to make it barely edible, and as you chew the fibrous, tasteless strips, you feel the gritty substance passing through your system, scraping out any last vestiges of sustenance. This intense, almost fossilized diet means your digestive tract is perpetually empty and irritated. The hunger is now past the point of pain. It has become a dull, constant emptiness, a metaphysical void that you are actively embracing. As you sit in your hut, slowly chewing on a handful of boiled pine needles, the intellectual debates about your practice begin to feel distant, yet relevant. Historians still argue whether this shift to a pure, non-nutritive diet was a necessary physical step or simply an extreme psychological test to prove absolute devotion and mastery over the physical world. For you, it is both. Every bitter, indigestible mouthful is a test of will. To eat so little, yet choose something so unpleasant, requires a discipline that overrides the most basic, frantic, evolutionary desire for pleasure and survival. You realize this is the point, to prove that you, the monk, are entirely in command, and the body, the machine, is a tool to be used and discarded at will. You remember the old, easy life and scoff lightly. Pine needles? I used to complain if my takeout arrived cold. Now I'm essentially eating a Christmas tree, and I'm grateful for it. What a life upgrade. The light joke breaks the oppressive silence for a moment, a necessary valve for the psychological pressure cooker you live in. But the reality is far from funny. Your skin has started to develop a strange brownish tint, and your breath carries a faint, acrid odor, the smell of a body cannibalizing itself. The physical activity of foraging does not stop. You must constantly search for these specific, low-value foods, requiring hours of slow, deliberate movement up and down the mountain slopes. This constant, low-grade physical activity is key. It burns the few calories you ingest and prevents your metabolism from slowing entirely into hibernation. You are walking yourself slowly into the ground. You start to notice changes in your senses. Hearing becomes hyperacute. You can hear the distinct crackle of a branch snapping 100 yards away. Your vision, however, suffers. Flashes of light sometimes accompany quick movements, a sign of nutritional deficiency and extreme stress. You no longer dream of food. Your dreams are filled with patterns of light and color, abstract and meaningless, suggesting the brain is struggling to process the lack of input. This phase is not just about diet, it's about the complete severance of worldly comfort. You have no fire for heat, only rough, thin blankets. You bathe rarely, and in cold water, further aiding the desiccation of the skin and hardening the body. You are attempting to make your physical self as close to stone as possible, while still retaining the spark of consciousness. You are preparing a permanent vessel for the soul's enlightenment. As you enter the final 100 days of this second phase, You look in the small, reflective pool of water. You avoid mirrors now, and see a skeleton in robes staring back. Your ribs are clearly visible, your limbs thin, and your eyes wide and sunken. You are no longer recognizable as the person who climbed this mountain. You are a biological process on the verge of cessation. You are dry, clean, and terrifyingly ready for the next, most crucial and shocking step, the poison. You have survived 2,000 days of deprivation. The mountain has consumed your body fat, your muscle, and most of your youthful vitality. Now, as you stand at the threshold of the third and final 1,000-day phase, the ritual shifts from a primarily physical endurance test to a profound act of social and ritual suicide. This is the phase of complete, intentional isolation, the final cutting of the cord that binds you to the world of the living. The mainstream historical fact marking this transition is the monk's formal move to the okubo, or death hut. You receive your final instructions from the abbot, a man whose face, despite the severity of the circumstances, shows only deep respect and a terrible, quiet pity. You are given a small, single-room structure, purpose-built and situated high above the main temple grounds, far from any paths and hidden by the dense, unforgiving woods. This is not simply about solitude. It is about creating a sterile, observation-free environment where the final, crucial biological steps can proceed without interruption or compromise. You are moving into your own waiting room for eternity. You carry your meager possessions, a bowl, your worn robes, and the sacred texts up the winding, difficult path one last time. Every ascent is a struggle. Your legs shake with the effort, and you have to stop every 50 paces to gasp for breath. But this physical struggle is part of the final letting go. When you finally reach the hut, you look back down at the main temple. You won't see another human face again until, perhaps, after the cessation of your life. The new structure is tiny, rough-hewn, and built with a dirt floor, which you soon realize is another deliberate design choice. A cold, perpetual dampness rises from the ground, further emphasizing the discomfort and the elemental nature of your task. There is a single, small window, unglazed, facing east towards the rising sun, the direction of spiritual awakening. But otherwise, it is bare. You are sealing yourself off from human warmth and human kindness, accepting the mountain's harsh indifference as your only companion. This is where the psychological challenge truly begins. Up until now, you had the rhythm of the community, however distant, and the daily activity of foraging to occupy your mind. Now, you have only the emptiness. You try to settle into the silence, but the silence itself is loud, full of the ringing in your ears, the faint, persistent heartbeat in your chest, and the constant, nagging voice of survival that whispers for you to just stop, go back, and eat a simple bowl of warm rice. You have to actively silence this internal clamor, replacing it with the monotonous drone of your chants. The quirky tidbit related to this isolation involves the traditional structure of the hut. Often, these final dwellings had an external, small, sliding panel, or a carefully constructed chute leading outside. This wasn't for socializing, of course, but for the most basic necessity, the removal of waste. Even in this ultimate state of spiritual focus, the practical matter of hygiene and elimination had to be addressed, but without ever seeing another person. The monks outside would quietly and quickly clear away the waste, a silent acknowledgement that the person inside was already transitioning beyond the needs of the living, yet still required this last, discreet service. You picture this exchange, a completely silent, non-verbal handoff between the living and the soon-to-be relic, and it is a profound, if slightly humiliating, reminder of your lingering humanity. Historians still argue whether the move into the okubo was primarily an act of ritual purity, removing the monk from potential societal contamination, or a practical necessity to protect the monk from interference during the final, vulnerable stages of his transformation. Given the next planned step, the consumption of poison, it seems likely it was a combination of both. You need absolute privacy to manage the intense physical reaction to the toxins you are about to ingest. You perform a final profound ritual inside the hut. You take your last, full bath. It is cold, naturally, and your shrunken body shivers uncontrollably. You use a rough cloth to scrub your skin until it is red and irritated. This isn't just about cleanliness. It's a symbolic washing away of the last vestiges of the world. You are scrubbing off the dirt of the samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and suffering, preparing for your final, permanent exit. You look at the dark, shrunken reflection of yourself in the water, and note how little of the original you is left. The joke you allow yourself here is grim. Well, if I fail the mummification, at least I'll be the cleanest decomposing corpse they've ever found. Silver linings, I guess. You immediately regret the thought. Humor is getting harder to find in this accelerating journey towards oblivion. The final piece of your self-imposed prison is the stockpile of materials delivered to your door. In addition to a few gallons of clean water, you are given small bags containing the next horrific phase of your diet: the raw materials for the preservation tea. This is the moment your focus locks onto the dreadful anticipation of the urushi poison, the Japanese lacquer that will internally embalm your body. Knowing that the next 100 days will be spent willingly ingesting a known toxin changes the atmosphere in your hut from one of simple deprivation to one of terrible waiting dread. You close the wooden panel over the small window, sealing out the fading light and welcoming the impenetrable darkness that will soon become your permanent reality. You are now fully isolated. The only sounds the wind rattling, the ill-fitting door of your okubo, and the incessant, high-pitched ringing in your ears that comes from chronic hunger. The silence of the mountain is both a comfort and a crushing weight. Your immediate task in this final period of preparation is to escalate the suffering of the flesh, specifically targeting the remaining moisture in your body. This is the phase of the stone-cold penance. You know that even with the extreme diet of pine needles and bark, residual moisture remains trapped in the tissues, especially in the muscle beds and internal organs. This moisture must be expelled before you ingest the toxic lacquer tea, which is why your next ritual involves deliberate, prolonged exposure to cold water and heavy exertion in thin robes. You are not trying to conserve body heat. You are trying to lose it, to force your body to dry out through constant, low-grade hypothermia. Each morning, before the sun crests the mountain, you make the painful trek down to the nearest mountain stream, whose water is barely above freezing. The walk is exhausting, every small movement a monumental effort for your weakened limbs. When you arrive, you do not simply bathe. You wade in and sit down, fully immersing yourself up to the neck. The shock is immediate, a physical assault that steals your breath and makes your skin erupt in painful goosebumps. The mainstream historical fact related to this is the practice of taki-jo, or waterfall purification, a ritual common in Shugendo. However, your version is far more extreme. You are not performing it for a brief moment of spiritual clarity. You are sitting in the freezing water for hours, sometimes until your teeth chatter so violently you cannot recite your mantras. This isn't just ritual. It's a brutal, self-administered cold therapy designed to contract the blood vessels, restrict blood flow, and force the body to use up every last energy reserve to stay alive. The resulting constant chill accelerates the breakdown of fat and, crucially, encourages the body to excrete more water through forced thermogenesis. You are essentially spending hours in a natural ice bath to induce a controlled state of physical shock. To increase the difficulty and symbolic weight of this suffering, you have also been tasked with carrying large river stones. You carefully select 2 smooth, heavy stones from the streambed, each weighing maybe 20 pounds. You hoist one onto each shoulder, using the strain to remind your muscles they are still capable of bearing weight, even as they waste away. You spend your afternoons slowly traversing the difficult, uneven slopes, carrying this additional, meaningless burden. The weight is entirely ceremonial, an extreme form of spiritual weightlifting. Well, at least I won't skip leg day, you think with a grim internal chuckle, trying to deflect the searing agony in your protesting joints. The quirky tidbit that keeps you focused during these grueling treks is the significance of the stones themselves. It was said among the monks that the rocks gathered from the stream were not just dead weight, but representations of the sins and worldly attachments you were shedding. As you walked, the cold, smooth surfaces of the stones pressed against your collarbone, an unrelenting, heavy reminder of the baggage you were determined to discard. You are literally carrying your past life uphill, intending to drop it permanently into the dirt as you ascend towards your final rest. As your body temperature drops, your mental state becomes strangely clear, almost delirious. The cold water induces a kind of high, an altered state of consciousness where the boundaries of self blur. This is the spiritual goal, the complete detachment from the flesh. You observe your pain with a detached curiosity, recognizing it not as yours, but as a property of the temporary vessel you inhabit. This is where the debate resides. Historians still argue whether the extreme physical practices, like prolonged cold exposure and starvation, led to the desired spiritual realization through mastery of the self, or if the resulting physiological stress, malnutrition, dehydration, and hypothermia induced profound psychological and hallucinatory states that were interpreted as enlightenment. For you, shivering uncontrollably, the difference is moot. The spiritual clarity is here, and the pain is the undeniable, agonizing payment for it. The daily routine of cold submersion followed by heavy carrying continues for weeks. Your skin takes on a pale, almost translucent quality. Your nails are brittle, and your hair has thinned dramatically. You spend long hours in meditation afterward, trying to bring your core temperature back up, but now, the cold seems to linger inside your body, permanently lodged in the deep marrow of your bones. You realize that this sustained suffering is the final, necessary precursor to the poison. The process of mummification hinges on the principle of making the body chemically and environmentally hostile to decomposition. The diet emptied it. The cold and exertion dried it. Now, the poison must seal it. You are hardening yourself, making your body less soft, fragile flesh, and more like an elemental extension of the rock, ice, and ancient wood of the mountain. You look forward to the introduction of the poison with a paradoxical mixture of terror and desperate relief, because it means one thing: this unbearable suffering is nearing its final, terrifying conclusion. You pass the 1-year mark of your final phase, the 1,000-day countdown to the chamber. Having endured the shock of isolation, the freezing water rituals, and the near-zero caloric diet of bark and needles, you stop to take stock. The change in your body is no longer gradual. It is a shocking testament to the body's cruel efficiency in self-consumption. You are no longer merely thin, you are utterly emaciated, a living anatomical diagram wrapped in dry, paper-thin skin. You rub the prominent ridges of your sternum, a bone that was once hidden beneath a comforting layer of flesh. Your collarbones jut out like the handles of a shovel. When you sit, your hip bones press painfully against the dirt floor, forcing you to constantly shift your position. This intense physical wasting is the mainstream historical fact of the preparation. Every surviving record, every account of the Sokushinbutsu preparation, emphasizes the sheer, brutal skinniness achieved through the multi-year process. The goal was to eliminate every last vestige of fat and fluid, and you are now the perfect, horrifying proof that the method works. The psychological toll is immense, yet strangely manageable. The initial frantic hunger has subsided into a dull, constant ache that you have integrated into your baseline consciousness. You've learned to focus on the pain, to acknowledge it, name it, and then dismiss it. It is simply background noise, like the persistent hum of the wind. Your mind, starved of external input and bodily comfort, has turned inward, becoming acutely sharp in some ways and strangely detached in others. You spend hours reciting the ancient, powerful mantras, their syllables becoming the only solid architecture in your dissolving world. There is a terrifying moment when you catch sight of yourself in a stagnant puddle after a light rain. You are startled, not because you see a ghost, but because the image staring back has no emotional resonance. It is just a thing, an object of contemplation, not you. This sense of radical detachment from your physical shell, the ability to view your own body's suffering with a cold, objective eye, is the spiritual payoff of the suffering. You realize the ultimate light joke is the idea of a bad hair day. You look like you haven't slept, eaten, or smiled in 3 centuries, and yet, you feel a profound, calm readiness for the next, most dreadful step. The quirky tidbit that occupied your thoughts during the long, dark nights of this phase was the practice of gazing at a skull. Some monks undergoing Sokushinbutsu preparation were reportedly given a human skull, sometimes one from a previously deceased, but unsuccessful monk, to keep in their cell. This was not a morbid joke, but a powerful meditation tool, a memento mori to force the confrontation with the certainty and immediacy of death. You didn't receive one, but you find yourself staring at your own skeleton, visible beneath your skin, which serves the same stark, immediate purpose. You are your own skull, your own death's head, walking and breathing. As the physical wasting continues, a major internal shift occurs. Your metabolism, operating on the fumes of ancient roots and pine resin, has slowed to an almost glacial pace. Your body is cold to the touch, even under thick robes, because there is no fuel left to generate heat. Every movement is a calculated expenditure of dwindling resources. You move and think with a profound, terrifying economy. Historians still argue whether the practice, particularly this phase of intense, calculated starvation, was fully understood by the monks through scientific knowledge or achieved through ancient, trial-and-error ascetic traditions. While they lacked modern biochemistry, the results, the near-total elimination of fat and fluid, suggest a deep, empirical understanding of the requirements for natural mummification. They knew what the body needed to not do, and they designed a process to surgically eliminate those functions. For you, the answer is simple. The tradition works because the body must obey the laws of consumption and decay, and you are simply rewriting the rules by starving the decay before it can begin. You begin to prepare your mind for the taste of the urushi. The substance is the Japanese lacquer, derived from the Toxicodendron vernicifluum tree, the very same compound that causes severe allergic reactions, contact dermatitis, and systemic poisoning. The older monks taught you that this preparation must be psychological as much as physical. You are about to willingly ingest a systemic poison. You must be completely accepting of the agony it will cause, recognizing it as the final purification, the ultimate internal preservative. You are making a contract with the toxin. It will kill the bacteria that would consume you, but only after it tries to kill you first. You look at the small packet of raw lacquer materials, a few dried flakes of the resin, with a mix of revulsion and religious ecstasy. This is the moment where the spiritual journey transitions into an undeniable chemical process. The next phase will be short, agonizing, and absolutely critical to your success. You have survived the mountain's harsh, slow embrace. Now, you must survive the sharp, sudden violence of the poison, all while locked in your cold, quiet hut. The atmosphere in your solitary hut has shifted dramatically. It is no longer dominated by the dull ache of hunger, but by a sharp, anticipatory dread. You are staring at the final chemical weapon in your arsenal against decomposition, the urushi resin. This is the third and most shocking phase of the preparation, the point of no return. You are committing chemical suicide for the sake of permanent preservation. You have spent the last 100 days gathering and preparing the raw materials. The urushi resin, extracted from the lacquer tree, is highly toxic when ingested, containing a potent compound called urushiol. In its raw form, this resin is used to make the beautiful, durable lacquerware of Japan, protecting wood from decay. Now, you are applying that preservation principle to your internal organs. Your task is to prepare a tea from the toxic substance. You carefully boil the dried flakes of the resin with specific mineral-rich water, creating a dark, viscous, and bitter concoction. The smell is acrid, faintly metallic, and carries the sharp, unmistakable warning of poison. You know that consuming this brew serves two critical functions. First, the toxins will act as a powerful emetic, causing violent vomiting and diarrhea, which will further purge the already depleted digestive system of any lingering fluids or food remnants. Second, and most critical, the urushiol will slowly permeate the internal tissues, making the body toxic to consume. Any insect or scavenging animal that comes near the body after death will be repelled or poisoned. You are making yourself inedible. The mainstream historical fact here is the use of toxic botanical substances as a crucial step. While different monks in different regions may have used variations like arsenic-laced water in certain times and places, the urushi, or a similar preparation, like the sap of the lacquer tree, was the method most famously associated with the successful Sokushinbutsu of Mount Udono. This step was so radical and so obviously suicidal that it had to be performed in the complete isolation of the death hut, far from any official inspection or intervention. It is the final, undeniable proof of absolute commitment. You hold the bowl of dark, lukewarm liquid. Your hands, thin and tremulous, nearly spill the contents. This is not sustenance. It is a contract with excruciating pain and death. You feel a sudden surge of something close to panic, the last frantic cry of your evolutionary programming. Your body is screaming, "Do not put poison inside me." You have to override that primal instinct with sheer, ritualistic will. You remember the quirky tidbit passed down through the monastic lineage. Sometimes, the monks would mix the urushi brew with a small amount of salt and miso paste, derived from a highly acidic, naturally preserved plum umeboshi. This wasn't for flavor, it was to slightly thicken the brew and, more importantly, to give the throat something tangible to react to, ensuring the emetic properties were maximized. The sharp, salty, sour taste of the plum, combined with the chemical bitterness of the urushi, was reportedly a sensory overload that guaranteed a violent rejection by the stomach. You think, with a light joke that doesn't quite land, of all the ways to get my daily sodium, this really isn't how I pictured it. You lift the bowl to your lips. The liquid is thick and burns slightly as it slides down your throat. You swallow quickly, emptying the bowl in a few desperate gulps. The reaction is not instant, but delayed, giving you a few terrifying minutes to sit in silence, contemplating the poison now churning inside you. You feel a strange, cold heat spreading through your stomach and bowels. It is a slow, creeping sensation of internal corruption. Then, the true agony begins. Historians still argue whether the monks were fully aware of the chemical process of urushiol, poisoning, how it causes systemic dermatitis and internal organ damage, or whether they simply trusted the traditional knowledge that the toxic sap preserves the wood, and so it shall preserve the man. Given the extreme secrecy, the empirical knowledge seems more likely, derived from centuries of agonizing trial and error. For you, the intellectual debate is lost in the rising tide of nausea. The first wave of pain hits. It is a searing, chemical burn, and your body immediately realizes its catastrophic mistake. Your stomach lurches with brutal force. You barely have time to grab the empty bowl before you are convulsing. The purge is violent, exhaustive, and utterly humiliating. You vomit until there is nothing left but bile, the acidic burn of the urushi returning to your throat. This is the final cleansing, the total evacuation of the gastrointestinal system. You are purging the self through the consumption of the toxin. The consumption continues for days, spaced out to allow your weakened system to recover slightly before the next dose. Each time, the agony is the same, perhaps worse, as your body grows more sensitive. Your skin begins to break out in severe rashes, a painful, blistering manifestation of the urushiol poisoning. You have to endure this, knowing that the agonizing pain is proof that the preservation process is working, that the poison is permeating your tissues and preparing your body for the long sleep. You are now chemically inedible, physically wasted, and spiritually ready. The days following the consumption of the urushi tea dissolve into a blur of raw, physical suffering. You are no longer dealing with the passive pain of starvation, but the active, searing violence of systemic poisoning. The toxin has turned your own body against itself, a necessary betrayal for the sake of eternal preservation. The primary torment is the vomiting, which continues with brutal regularity. Even though your stomach has been entirely emptied, purged not just of food, but of almost all internal fluids and mucus, the retching continues. It is dry, heaving, muscle-spasming agony. You are vomiting air and bile, and the effort alone threatens to tear the last remaining strength from your frail body. You clutch your sides, your ribs aching with the force of the convulsions. This process is the final, non-negotiable step in internal desiccation. The repeated purging ensures the gastrointestinal tract is clean and dry, the most vulnerable area for post-mortem decomposition. Worse than the internal agony is the external reaction to the urushiol. The chemical, which caused that severe rash upon contact, is now coursing through your bloodstream. Your entire body is covered in a painful, blistering rash, a severe allergic dermatitis that feels like a full-body burn. Your skin is inflamed, itchy beyond bearing, and weeping serum in places. You dare not scratch, knowing that open wounds could introduce infection, but the impulse is maddening. You try to soothe the burning with the thinnest, roughest cloth, but nothing helps. You are a walking, agonizing allergic reaction. The mainstream historical fact often missed when discussing this practice is that the suffering during the urushi phase was often the cause of failure. Many monks, already weakened to the point of collapse, succumbed to the compounding effects of dehydration, malnutrition, and the intense, systemic shock of the poison before they could enter the final sealed chamber. Their bodies would decay before the 3-year waiting period was over, resulting in a failed Sokushinbutsu. You realize with terrifying clarity that you are now walking a razor's edge. You need the poison to be effective, but you must survive its initial, violent assault. You try to focus on the quirky tidbit you recall about the monk's ritual use of medicinal charcoal during this phase. Not only did they use charcoal from the burnt bark of special woods to clean their drinking water, but some accounts suggest they would chew small amounts of a crushed, highly absorbent charcoal after the vomiting episodes. This was an ancient attempt at modern-day activated charcoal, trying to bind to and neutralize some of the residual toxins in the stomach and intestines, offering a momentary reprieve from the churning. You find a small, dusty piece of charred root and chew it to a bitter paste. A small, futile act of self-care amidst the chemical storm. Your mental state is one of heightened desperation and profound clarity. The pain is so absolute, so all-consuming, that it transcends mere suffering and becomes a pure state of being. You realize, with a moment of terrifying illumination, that this is the final trick of the body to use the fear of pain to force the will to live. You have to actively choose the pain, to embrace it as your purification. You think of the pain as a fiery, internal monk, ruthlessly sweeping away the last fragments of your attachment to the world. In this agony, you even manage a fleeting, dark joke. If I ever see a cup of tea again, I'm going to run in the opposite direction. I've officially reached my lifetime quota for cleansing beverages. The joke is hollow, swallowed almost immediately by the next wave of nausea. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rate during this phase was deliberately intended to serve as a final, definitive filter, ensuring that only those with the most extreme physical endurance and spiritual resolve made it to the next step. If a monk died here, his sacrifice was still considered noble, but his body would not be preserved. Only the survivors, who entered the box, truly became living Buddhas. This harsh calculus of success and failure drives you. You must hold on, you must survive the toxin, or the agonizing years of deprivation will have been for nothing. The lack of sleep compounds the suffering. Every muscle in your body is tense, and the constant burning on your skin makes lying still impossible. You rock back and forth, reciting the mantra that means, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, repeating the phrases until they lose all meaning and become just sound, a rhythmic vibration to distract from the fire inside. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of continuous agony, the severity of the reaction begins to subside. The vomiting becomes less frequent, the chemical burn in your gut less intense, the rash remains, but the systemic poisoning is receding. You have survived the internal purge. You are now chemically inert, physically desiccated, and ready for the deepest, darkest sleep of all. The final step entering the stone chamber is imminent, and the relief that the agony of the poison is almost over is the only thing driving your last, fragile efforts. The final morning arrives with a profound, terrifying stillness. You have survived the starvation, the cold, and the chemical violence of the urushi. Your body is a fragile, desiccated structure, chemically preserved from the inside out. Your journey on the outside of the earth is over. Today, you enter your final home, the stone burial chamber. You are too weak to walk down the mountain, so the remaining monks, the solemn, silent watchers of your final transition, arrive at your okubo. There is no ceremony, only the quiet, efficient performance of ritual duty. They lift you gently, your body feeling weightless and brittle, and carry you down the steep path to the prepared site, the place you marked with a small wooden stake years ago. The burial chamber, often called the Nujo Zukutsu, or entering the cave of the self, is a simple but terrifying construction. It is a stone box, typically just large enough for a person to sit upright in the lotus position, your final posture. The zazen position. The dimensions are calculated to provide just enough space for your body, ensuring a tight fit that minimizes air circulation, which is crucial for preservation. You realize that once inside, you will not be able to stretch your legs, shift your back, or even raise your arms fully. This is a prison of stone, specifically tailored to hold you in perpetual meditation. As they lower your body into the earthen pit, you feel the cold, damp stone against your bare back. The chamber is deep enough that the top will be level with the surrounding ground once the capstone is put in place. You are eased into the lotus position, kekafuza, your legs folded tightly, your hands resting in the cosmic mudra. Your body is so thin that the position, once difficult, is now merely painful. A small simple bell is placed on a cloth cushion in front of you, a crucial tool for the final ritual. The mainstream historical fact regarding the construction is the careful consideration given to drainage and ventilation. The chamber itself was almost always lined with a specific type of clay or stone, chosen for its ability to wick away any lingering moisture from the body. Often, a layer of charcoal was placed on the floor for its absorbent and antiseptic properties. You are sitting on a bed of natural preservatives, a stark realization that every single step of this process, even the construction of your final resting place, has been an act of deliberate chemical preparation. You are literally being seasoned for eternity. As the monks work outside, preparing the heavy capstone, you look around the small confines of your box. The walls are rough, damp, and cold. The only light comes from the shrinking aperture above you. The air inside is still, heavy, and already smells faintly of damp earth and the acrid residue of the urushi on your skin. The quirky tidbit about this stage concerns the small offering placed inside the box. While no food or water was permitted, sometimes a single, perfectly preserved item of deep personal or spiritual significance was placed beside the monk. This might be a favorite small sutra scroll, or a piece of polished wood the monk had carved. It was a final, small concession to the self being laid to rest, an acknowledgement of the individual's journey before they transcended their individuality to become the Buddha. You glance at the tiny, worn wooden amulet you've been allowed to keep, a small, silent companion for your final journey. Your mind, though weakened, is acutely focused. This claustrophobic space is designed to remove all external distraction. Your only remaining sense of connection to the outside world is the voices of the monks, muffled and distant, as they prepare the final seal. This is the point where the distinction between spiritual act and physical consequence blurs entirely. Historians still argue whether the final act of sealing the chamber was viewed primarily by the monks as a ritualistic interment, placing a relic in a reliquary, or as a necessary environmental control measure essential for the process of mummification by creating an anaerobic, dry, and cool environment. For you, the answer is both. The box is sacred ground, but its stone walls are also the perfect physical conditions for preservation. The stone protects the spirit by protecting the shell. You take a deep, shaky breath, the air already feeling stale. Your body, already a relic in waiting, feels strangely numb. You realize the ultimate light joke is that after years of meticulously planned diet and exercise, your final moments are going to be spent in a cramped, dark hole. It's like signing up for a massive health kick, only to end up being buried alive. The thought generates a hollow internal sigh that doesn't quite reach your lips. The monks are ready. They pass down one final vital piece of equipment, a short, curved piece of bamboo tubing. This is the breathing tube, your last physical umbilical cord to the living world. They carefully position the end of the tube so it rests near your mouth, with the other end extending up through the layers of earth and stone to the surface. Your eyes fix on the small, dark opening of the tube, your only link to air. The heavy, flat capstone is slowly dragged into place. The light shrinks to a single, sliver-thin line, then vanishes entirely as the stone scrapes into its final position. You are instantly plunged into absolute, impenetrable darkness. The sound of the grinding stone is the last distinct noise you will hear from the living world. The earth is packed around the stone. You are buried. The final vigil has begun. The darkness is absolute, a thick, suffocating velvet that presses against your eyelids and seems to fill your ears. You are sealed beneath the earth, the silence broken only by the frantic sound of your own heart beating, a panicked, rapid rhythm against the cold stone. Your only physical connection to the world you have just abandoned is the bamboo breathing tube. You carefully feel for it, your skeletal fingers brushing against the cold, slightly rough stalk. It is positioned perfectly, resting close enough to your face that you don't have to move your head to draw air. The tube is a simple, hollow cylinder, yet it carries the entire burden of your immediate survival. It is the architectural linchpin of the whole, elaborate, macabre ritual. You realize with chilling clarity that this tube is not just bringing air in. It is also serving a final, subtle, and terrifying function. It is the primary exit route for your remaining moisture. The air that flows in, however thin and slow, carries away the final droplets of condensation from your lungs, accelerating the desiccation process from within the deepest tissues. The mainstream historical fact regarding this apparatus is its deliberate, limited design. The bamboo tube was specifically chosen to be narrow and curved, restricting airflow to a minimum necessary for survival, but not enough to encourage rapid bacterial growth or introduce too much moisture. The monks were creating a low-oxygen, high-carbon dioxide environment, a near anaerobic space that drastically inhibits the microorganisms responsible for decay. You are effectively putting yourself into a state of suspended animation by limiting the one thing your body needs most: abundant, fresh air. You try a small, shallow breath through the tube. The air is cool, damp, and carries the heavy, loamy scent of the surrounding earth, mixed with the faint, metallic tang of the stone. It's a taste of your future. You realize that your entire focus, all the suffering and years of preparation, has been for this final act: to sit perfectly still, breathing as little as possible, until your body's systems shut down. The quirky tidbit about the bamboo tube is the specific type of wood used. It was often selected from a variety of wild mountain bamboo, Sasa curulensis, known for its incredibly dense, tight grain. The choice wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. This bamboo was known to withstand the brutal mountain weather, representing the monk's own resilience and his successful endurance of the elements. You are relying on a simple, hardy piece of nature to ferry your last few breaths. A perfect paradox of fragility and strength. Your mental state begins to shift under the pressure of the absolute darkness and the claustrophobia. Your thoughts, once racing with anxiety, slow down, becoming weighty and distant. The noise of the world is completely gone. There are no sounds to distract, only the relentless internal monologue and the thin, wheezing sound of your own inhalation. You try to fix your mind on your mantra, repeating the sacred syllables, Namu Amida Butsu. Historians still argue whether the final, intended cause of death for the Sokushinbutsu was pure starvation and dehydration, or asphyxiation from the restricted oxygen supply within the sealed chamber. Given the extreme emaciation, starvation, and the systemic failure of organs are the most likely ultimate causes. But the low oxygen certainly sped up the process, pushing the monk's body into a non-viable state of metabolic shutdown. For you, sitting in the absolute dark, the distinction seems meaningless. Death is coming, through the exhaustion of your body's final resources, facilitated by the environmental controls of your stone prison. You find a flicker of that gentle sarcasm, a final, dark light joke. Well, after years of wanting some peace and quiet, I've really overshot the mark. I hope the neighbors don't mind the total lack of socializing. It's a hollow thought, a necessary attempt to remind yourself that there was once a world where noise and human interaction were taken for granted. Your attention returns to the tube. It is your only measure of time, your only gauge of existence. As you continue to sit, your breath becomes shallower, slower. You realize that the only way to succeed is to entirely surrender to the darkness, to the cold, and to the slow, gentle suffocation. You are no longer fighting the mountain, you are becoming part of it. The stone box is your cocoon, and the breathing tube is the final thread that must eventually snap, signifying your passage from man to Hotoku Buddha. You settle your hands into the mudra, your thumb and forefinger lightly touching, and wait for the signal. You are buried. The reality of it is not a thought, but a physical presence, the cold, immovable weight of the earth and stone pressing in on you. The absolute darkness is total, a sensory void that swallows light, space, and time. Your final, most challenging task begins now. To sit in perfect stillness, in the lotus position, and transition your mind and body from life to death through the sheer force of meditation. The silence is the most profound part of your experience. The monks outside have finished their work, and the earth is packed down above your stone chamber. You are isolated from all ambient sound, the wind, the rustle of leaves, the calls of birds. The only sound left is internal, the rushing of blood in your ears, a noise that grows louder and more insistent in the quiet, and the faint, shallow wheeze of your own breathing through the bamboo tube. Your primary focus is the bell. A small, brass handbell rests on the cushion before you. This bell is your final ritualistic link to the living world and the most immediate measure of your continued existence. Once a day, at a pre-arranged time, you must reach out and gently strike the bell. The sound, muffled by the earth, carries just enough to the surface to signal to the watching monks that the process is ongoing, that the tenant in the stone box is still alive, still seated, and still breathing. The first few hours are the hardest. The physical discomfort is immediate and agonizing. The cold of the stone seeps into your joints, which are already protesting the long-held lotus position. Your back aches, your knees scream, and the intense claustrophobia fights the mental clarity you desperately need. Every instinct screams at you to move, to stretch, to break the seal and climb out. You realize this is the final, ultimate test of self-mastery. The mainstream historical fact that helps you manage this pain is the established routine of the monks above ground. They are dedicated to this ritual, often building a small shelter nearby and committing to a vigil that could last for days or weeks. Knowing they are there, listening for the faint sound of your bell, provides a strange, distant comfort and motivation. Your commitment is mirrored by their quiet, patient commitment to your final rite. Your success is their spiritual triumph. To combat the sensory deprivation and the panic, you redouble your meditation. You focus entirely on the space between your breaths, counting them, lengthening the pauses between inhale and exhale. The goal is to slow your metabolism to its absolute lowest possible setting, conserving the scant oxygen and the body's last flicker of energy. You are trying to achieve a state of nujo, a deep, transformative trance, where the difference between life and death becomes minimal. The quirky tidbit that often came up in the older monks' teachings during this final phase was the importance of the lotus seed. Some accounts suggest the monks were encouraged to hold a single, tiny, perfectly formed lotus seed in their non-mudra hand. The lotus seed is famed for its extreme longevity and ability to sprout after thousands of years. It was a physical reminder of the promise. Even when entombed, the core of your being, like the seed, would remain perfectly preserved and ready for the eternal flourishing of Buddhahood. This tiny, invisible promise in the dark is a profound psychological anchor. Historians still argue whether the practice of ringing the bell was purely a religious ritual, a daily invocation, or a critical failsafe to confirm the monk's ability to maintain the lotus position and the low oxygen environment. If the bell rings, the monk is alive and still seated. If the bell stops, the process of mummification can officially begin. For you, the bell is everything. It is the rhythmic, metallic heartbeat of your final, conscious moments. As the hours drag on, your vision, having no light to process, begins to play tricks. Flickers of color appear on the inside of your eyelids, phosphenes, generated by the starved visual cortex. You see faint geometric patterns, spirals, and strange, flowing shapes. You welcome this internal light show as a sign of your deepening trance, a sign that the mind is beginning to detach from the external world. You allow yourself a final, gentle light joke. I guess if I wanted to escape this, I should have learned Morse code. Ringing this bell once a day isn't going to get me a whole lot of attention. The silence swallows the thought, but the mental release it offers is momentary and necessary. The time arrives for the first toll. You slowly, carefully raise your arm. Every muscle protests the movement, a searing cramp running through your shoulder and back. You bring your hand down and tap the bell once. A small, distinct ting. The sound is tinny in the close air of the box, but you know it is enough. You hear the deep earth absorb the sound. You lower your hand back into the mudra. Your energy completely spent by the small exertion. You have signaled your life. You have confirmed your imprisonment. The long vigil of silence has truly begun. The rhythm of the days now entirely revolves around the bell. Every rotation of the sun, which you cannot see but can vaguely sense through the ambient temperature shifts of the earth above, brings the required moment to signal your life. The act of ringing the bell is the final, minimal ritual that separates your consciousness from the silence of eternity. In the crushing, immovable darkness, the only structure you possess is the anticipation and execution of that one daily toll. You use your deep, meditative state to precisely track the time, or at least the monastic time set for the ritual. When you judge the moment is right, you break your perfect stillness. The movement is now an exquisite agony. Years of extreme deprivation have made your muscles stringy and weak, and the cold of the chamber has stiffened your joints into a painful, fragile permanence. You carefully lift your right hand toward the bell. The sound of the small movement, the faint rustle of your robes, the creak of your knuckles, is amplified tenfold in the silence of the stone box. You bring your hand down and tap the clapper against the brass once. Ting! The bell's sound is surprisingly loud in your confined space, a brief, sharp shock in the oceanic quiet. You listen intensely, trying to discern if the sound penetrates the earth above. You believe it does. You imagine the solitary monk sitting vigilantly above, hearing that faint, muffled ping, a sign that the living Buddha is still sitting, still enduring, still fulfilling his vow. This single, daily action is the most profound communication you will ever make. It says, I am here. The process is working. Wait. The mainstream historical fact that makes this bell so critical is its role as the definitive terminus ad quem, the boundary marker for the mummification process. The moment the bell failed to ring, the living monks would wait one final, respectful day, and then seal the breathing tube entirely, officially recognizing the cessation of life. This bell was not just a signal, it was a ritual contract that determined the precise timing of your permanent entombment. As the days crawl by, the effort required to ring the bell increases dramatically. Your energy reserves are virtually non-existent. The food you ate years ago, the roots and bark from months ago, it is all gone. Your body is now entirely sustained by a metabolism so slow it is bordering on non-existence, and by the sheer, unyielding force of your spiritual will. The ringing becomes shallower, the movement slower, the resulting ting quieter. You realize that the bell's eventual silence will not be a sudden snap, but a slow, agonizing fade. The quirky tidbit about this bell ritual is its traditional name in some sects, the voice of the Dharma. The monks saw the sound as the final, pure expression of the Buddha's teaching, emanating from the earth. When the sound ceased, it was understood that the monk had fully merged with the Dharma and no longer required a physical voice. You are literally using the bell to broadcast your final, living sermon into the air above. Your meditation deepens, fueled by the desperation of your circumstances. You have nothing left but your breath and your mind. You begin to experience a profound sense of temporal distortion. Hours pass like minutes, and entire days can feel like a single, seamless stretch of meditation. This altered state is your salvation against the madness of the dark. Historians still argue whether the monk's commitment to ringing the bell until the moment of death was a biological possibility, or whether, in the final stages of systemic failure, the last few tolls were performed through a kind of delirious reflex, or were perhaps even faked by the listening monk. It's to ensure the ritual timing was correct. For you, the answer is simple. You must ring it. The vow demands it. To fail to ring the bell would be to fail your final spiritual duty, a lapse of discipline that could negate the success of your preservation. The fear of that failure is a powerful motivator. One day, you raise your arm. The effort sends a wave of nausea and lightheadedness crashing through your already depleted system. The pain in your shoulder is intense, a sharp, white light in the darkness. You focus all your remaining will, all the spiritual energy gleaned from your years of suffering, on this simple act. You tap the bell. Ting. You realize, with a sudden, devastating clarity, that this is the last time. Your body simply does not have the strength for another day's toll. The energy expenditure required for this single movement has depleted the final reserves. You lower your hand back to the mudra and settle deeper into the cold stone, accepting the fact that you have just signaled your final, living message. The next day, the silence will be permanent. The light joke is gone entirely. There is only the vast, cold stillness of the final moment. You have surrendered to the bell's last toll. The cessation of the bell's toll is not an event you witness, it is an event you cause. Having spent the last of your energy on that final, faint ting, you settle back into the cold stone, knowing the external world is now holding its breath. The monks above will wait another day, a final grace period, before sealing the bamboo tube. But for you, the severance is already complete. You are now entirely alone, wrapped in the profound, consuming stillness of the grave. In the first few days that follow, the lack of hunger is your terrifying comfort. The hunger has passed from a gnawing ache to a dull, profound emptiness. Your body has entirely depleted its last stores of energy and has entered a state of terminal shutdown. Your metabolic processes have slowed to a terrifying crawl. Your heart beats with an almost imperceptible slowness, and your breath through the bamboo tube is so shallow that it feels like a mere sigh. You are an organism running on the final sputtering fumes of consciousness. Your focus shifts entirely to the pain of stillness. Since you are forbidden to move from the lotus position, every remaining hour is a battle against the agony of your locked joints and the constant chilling cold. The deep marrow of your bones aches. The skin over your knees, where the bones press against the stone floor, is raw and painfully thin. This prolonged, agonizing immobility is the mainstream historical fact that characterized the final stage. The successful Sokushinbutsu were found in a state of perfect preserved posture, demonstrating their absolute physical mastery over the final urges of the body. The quirky tidbit that often sustained monks in this stage was the visualization of the diamond realm, Mandala Kongo, Kai Mandala. With no external visual input, the mind was encouraged to construct this complex, intricate visual aid, a map of the cosmos, and the various aspects of the Buddha in the total darkness. The extreme effort required to hold this detailed image in your mind served as a spiritual counterpoint to the body's physical disintegration. You force yourself to trace the lines of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the velvety void, using the intellectual rigor of the visualization to suppress the animal terror of being buried alive. As the second week approaches, the reality of systemic organ failure begins. You feel a strange, cold heaviness in your gut, the final, slow death of your internal systems. Your kidneys, starved of water and poisoned by the urushi, are shutting down. Your brain, deprived of glucose, enters long stretches of confused, semi-conscious thought. Time ceases to have any meaning, and you exist in a perpetual cold drift. This phase is where the ultimate question of the ritual rests. Historians still argue whether the final moments of the monk involved a conscious, peaceful transition into Nujo, deep trance, or were simply the involuntary result of profound cerebral hypoxia and systemic shock. For you, the experience is a strange mix. There is a profound, meditative peace, a sense of victory over the body's demands, interspersed with short, sharp, terrifying bursts of clarity, where the reality of your fate floods back. You oscillate between spiritual ecstasy and cold, physical dread. You try to find a final, gentle light joke in the absurdity of your situation. Well, if I was ever asked what the most restrictive diet in history was, I've now got a winning answer. No carbs, no sugar, no water, and eventually, no life. The ultimate cleanse. But even this thought is weak. Barely a whisper in the echoing quiet of your skull, you feel the finality of the outside world's actions. You know the external monks, after waiting their requisite time, have come and sealed the bamboo tube. The rush of fresh air, however thin, is gone. You are now truly sealed, relying on the last few pockets of air trapped in the stone chamber. The oxygen level drops instantly, and the air becomes thick with carbon dioxide. This final environmental control is the ultimate accelerant for the mummification, ensuring that the last, stubborn pockets of bacteria cannot thrive in the now anaerobic atmosphere. The lack of oxygen induces a powerful, euphoric lightheadedness, a gentle, rising tide that lifts you away from the cold reality of the stone. Your thoughts become disconnected, dreamlike, and profoundly peaceful. The physical pain, the cold, the hunger, it all recedes, replaced by a soft white noise of failing senses. You are an island of consciousness in an ocean of biological shutdown, waiting for the final wave to wash over you. The great sleep is beckoning, and you let the cold, calming darkness consume you. With the bamboo tube sealed and the absolute silence returning, you enter the final, irreversible decline. The sensory deprivation is now total, a state of profound nothingness that presses in on your mind. You are experiencing the ultimate controlled environment. Zero light, zero external sound, minimal air, and the crushing, immovable presence of the stone box. In this void, your brain, starved of external stimulus and profoundly stressed by oxygen deprivation and starvation, begins to turn inward, fabricating its own reality. The darkness is no longer just the absence of light. It becomes a canvas for hallucinations. These are not the terrifying phantoms of madness, but strange, beautiful, and deeply personal visions. You begin to see faint, undulating lights that drift through the darkness, soft greens, deep blues, and shimmering golds. These are the phosphenes intensifying, visual static, generated by your own optic nerve, which your starved mind interprets as signs of the pure land or the final enlightenment you seek. You welcome them as internal manifestations of the Buddha, recognizing them as the final trick of the mind before it surrenders. Auditory hallucinations follow the visual ones. The intense ringing in your ears, the tinnitus caused by your failing circulatory system, morphs into a rhythmic, pulsing sound. Sometimes it sounds like the slow, deep toll of a vast, distant temple bell. Other times, it is a complex, beautiful choral chant, a heavenly symphony that seems to swell and recede in the close air of the box. You interpret these sounds not as biological failures, but as the music of the Dharma, the cosmic vibrations, accompanying your final, transcendent journey. The mainstream historical fact explaining this phenomenon is the physiological effect of cerebral hypoxia, oxygen deprivation. When the brain is starved of oxygen, its electrical activity becomes erratic, leading to altered states of consciousness, euphoria, and complex hallucinations. The monks, lacking this scientific explanation, incorporated these intense, vivid internal experiences into their spiritual narrative, interpreting the hallucinations as proof that they were successfully detaching from the physical world and entering the realm of the eternal. The pain and the hunger are gone, replaced by this strange, internal euphoria. Your sense of touch begins to fail. The agonizing cold of the stone and the pressure on your joints recede, replaced by a strange, floating numbness. You can no longer reliably feel your own hands resting in the mudra. This dissociation is the ultimate achievement of the ritual. The mind is finally separating itself from the body, achieving the detachment required for Buddhahood. The body is now merely a preserved shell, already a mummy, while the consciousness hovers in a space of self-generated light and sound. The quirky tidbit regarding this phase is the traditional concept of the inner fire, Naisho. Monks were taught to cultivate an internal warmth, not of physical heat, but of intense spiritual focus, which they believed would protect them from the cold and the external environment. In your hallucinatory state, you feel this fire, a gentle, pervasive warmth that seems to radiate from your chest, countering the damp, bone-chilling cold of the tomb. You realize this fire is simply your mind creating a powerful illusion to comfort your dying body. You find yourself observing the final, terrifying paradox of the ritual. You are using a process of slow, chemical death to achieve a state of vibrant, transcendent internal life. You are dying in order to truly see and hear the reality of the cosmos, mediated only by your own starved, gasping brain. This is the central point of the ongoing debate. Historians still argue whether the peace described by monks who approached this state and the serenity of the bodies found was genuine spiritual ecstasy or the profound, chemical calm induced by fatal organ failure. For you, now immersed in the beautiful, silent unfolding of internal light, the question is irrelevant. The peace is real, the detachment is absolute, and the suffering has finally been eclipsed by the vision. You realize, with a final, gentle light joke that barely registers, that you have gone through years of deprivation just to enjoy the most intense light show available. You are no longer fighting for life. You are embracing the process of letting go. Every hallucination, every flicker of color, every sound of the celestial choir is another gentle step away from the physical and toward the permanent, preserved silence. Your breath is now so shallow it is undetectable. Your heart is merely fluttering. You are sitting at the final gateway, waiting for the last, quiet shuddering of consciousness. The perfect stillness of the stone box has become the perfect stillness of your mind. The hallucinations recede, not with a jolt, but with a slow, gentle fade, like a candle extinguishing itself in a vacuum. You feel a profound, final deceleration. Your body, already a husk of dried tissue and bone, has reached its 0 point. There is no more pain, no more cold, and critically, no more conscious, willful thought. There is only the elemental reality of the stone, the dark, and the absolute absence of movement. You are no longer breathing, you are merely sighing. The respiratory reflex, which has doggedly kept you alive despite the lack of oxygen and the chemical trauma, is now failing. Each breath is shallower than the last, an involuntary whisper of the body giving up its lease on life. You are a dying ember in the heart of the earth. The mainstream historical fact you realize now is the critical importance of achieving this state of near-perfect stillness while still conscious. The success of the mummification relied on the body dying in the lotus position and staying there. If you had collapsed, or if your body had convulsed in its final moments, the mummification would still have occurred, but the resulting Sokushinbutsu would not have the desired transcendent posture of a Buddha in meditation. The stillness of your final moments is the ultimate proof of your spiritual mastery. Your consciousness, now a tiny, distant pinprick of light, is watching the whole process with a calm, objective detachment. You are observing your own death, a final, sublime meditation on the impermanence of the physical form. You feel the slow, heavy thud of your heartbeat become irregular, a final, exhausted protest before it, too, falters. The quirky tidbit that accompanies this final stage, one whispered among the elder monks, involves the practice of holding the thought. Monks were instructed to fix their minds on a single, benevolent thought, a dharma seal, and hold it until the moment of death. The belief was that the purity of that final thought would be impressed upon the preserved body, radiating its virtue for eternity. You try to hold the single thought of metta, unconditional, loving kindness, a final spiritual act of defiance against the cruelty of your journey. You feel the final breath leave your lungs. It is not a gasp, but a smooth, seamless letting go, a gentle exhalation that does not require an inhalation to follow. The air in the sealed chamber, which you've been sharing with the bacteria you tried to poison, is still, thick, and perfectly silent. The subtle pressure you once felt to breathe is gone. The instant of death is a quiet, profound transition from the conscious act of being to the absolute, unmoving state of becoming. Your eyes, already open and unblinking in the darkness, lose their final, living light. Your posture remains perfect, your hands resting in the mudra, your body an exquisite shell of bone and sinew, chemically preserved and desiccated. This is the central point of philosophical contention. Historians still argue whether the Sokushinbutsu achieved a true state of Nujo, an eternal, suspended trance, or simply an extraordinary form of post-mortem preservation. For the faithful, this moment of stillness is the monk achieving the final, highest plane of Buddhahood, the physical realization of the Buddha's own eternal body. For you, the newly departed, the question is now entirely moot. There is only the vast, cold stillness. The work of the spirit is complete. The work of the earth now begins. The body, having been stripped of fat, moisture, and life, and chemically treated with poison, now sits in an anaerobic, temperature-stable environment that is essentially a perfect, slow-acting oven. The lack of oxygen prevents aerobic decomposition. The urushi repels scavengers and anaerobic bacteria, and the dryness ensures the body won't putrefy. You have successfully created the ideal conditions for natural preservation. There is no light joke now, only the cold, unblinking truth. The journey is over. The suffering has purchased an eternity of stillness. You are a silent, perfect monument to an extreme spiritual vow, waiting for the earth to complete its long, slow work of turning flesh into relic. You are a Sokushinbutsu, now resting in the darkness. The absolute silence that now reigns inside your stone box is finally mirrored by a profound, agonizing stillness on the surface of the mountain. For the monks above, the cessation of the bell's daily toll is not a moment of mourning, but a signal for the beginning of the most delicate and crucial phase of the ritual, the 3-year vigil. The time of living sacrifice is over. The time of patient, silent observation has begun. The monks have sealed the bamboo breathing tube, a final act that definitively cuts your connection to the world of the living and transforms your burial chamber into a perfectly sealed, anaerobic environment. This sealing is a mainstream historical fact and the final, necessary technical step. By preventing any further ingress of oxygen, they are maximizing the chances of successful preservation, denying any remaining aerobic bacteria the life-sustaining element they need to cause decay. Your tomb is now a biological vault. You are no longer conscious of the passage of time, but the world continues above you. The handful of monks, often those who guided you through the most difficult phases, establish a small, temporary shelter near the burial site. They commit themselves to a long, low-key, but intensely focused vigil. Their task is to ensure the absolute sanctity and undisturbed nature of the site. They maintain a silent watch against curious intruders, local animals, or the possibility of a natural event like a landslide or flooding, any of which could compromise the perfect environment of the tomb. Their waiting is not passive. They maintain a constant, low-level ritual of chanting and meditation near the burial mound, dedicating the merit of their own practice to your silent journey. They believe that even though your bell is silent, your spirit, having achieved the state of Nujo, continues its subtle, powerful influence on the world. Your silence is a new form of communication, a steady, profound transmission of the Dharma from deep within the earth. The quirky tidbit about this 3-year period is the meticulous attention paid to the subtle signs of the earth's response. The watching monks would regularly check the soil above the capstone for any unusual changes. The sight of a healthy flower or a patch of vibrant moss growing directly over the burial spot was often interpreted as a positive sign. The earth itself was acknowledging the purity and sanctity of the body beneath, indicating a successful transition. Conversely, Any unusual seepage or the strong scent of decomposition would confirm the failure of the mummification, a result that was accepted with sad resignation. Your body, meanwhile, is undergoing the final subtle work of preservation. In the cold, dry, oxygen-depleted darkness, the remaining moisture in your deep tissues slowly begins to sublimate or is chemically bound by the urushi residue. Your skin, already thin, tightens further, drawing your features into an expression of serene stillness. The processes of decay, which normally begin within hours of death, are dramatically inhibited, slowed to a glacial pace by the years of preparation. Historians still argue whether the traditional waiting period of exactly 1,000 days, or sometimes 3 years, was chosen for practical biological reasons, allowing sufficient time for complete post-mortem desiccation, or for purely symbolic and ritualistic reasons, reflecting the 3 phases of the original preparation. Given the chemical nature of the urushi and the need for thorough drying, a lengthy period was undeniably necessary, suggesting a blend of practical knowledge derived from trial and error and the powerful symbolism of the number 3. For the monks above, the emotional toll is immense. They have witnessed a fellow practitioner undergo the most extreme act of sacrifice, and now they must simply wait, hoping that their friend's agonizing journey has secured a permanent, sacred outcome. They are caught between the religious certainty of the outcome and the biological uncertainty of the physical process. 3 years is an eternity to wait for a success or failure that hinges on the perfect convergence of ancient ritual, plant-based chemistry, and individual willpower. For you, the silent tenant below, there is only the vast, cold stillness. You are the sacred promise, entombed, waiting for the earth itself to confirm your divinity. The final judgment is not in the heavens, but in the soil, and the monks must endure this long, silent, earthly purgatory. 3 years have passed. The mountain has completed its long, silent contract. The monks above ground, having endured their patient vigil, now approach the burial site for the single, most critical act of the entire ritual, the unsealing and inspection. This moment, fraught with both spiritual anticipation and terrifying biological uncertainty, will determine if your sacrifice was successful, if you have truly become a Sokushinbutsu. The air is tense as the monks, led by the abbot, carefully excavate the earth above the capstone. It is a slow, painstaking process. They remove the soil, then the protective layer of clay, until the heavy stone slab covering your chamber is fully exposed. The work is conducted in reverent silence, every scrape of the shovel a profound event. They understand they are about to disturb not a grave, but a potentially consecrated reliquary. The mainstream historical fact defining this moment is the procedure for opening the chamber. The capstone is lifted with immense care, often using simple levers, to prevent any damage to the remains within. As the heavy stone is moved, the first rush of air from the interior of the chamber is analyzed by the monks. A successful mummification, conducted in an anaerobic environment, should not release the expected, horrific odor of decay, but rather a dry, loamy, earthy scent. The absence of the stench of putrefaction is the first, immediate confirmation that the 3-year vigil has been a success. Light floods into the chamber for the first time in over 1,000 days, breaking the absolute darkness that was your final companion. You are revealed, seated perfectly upright in the lotus position, your hands resting in the mudra. The sight is, to any uninitiated eye, dreadful and shocking. Your body is no longer a recognizable human form. The years of desiccation, starvation, and the urushi poison have reduced you to a dark, fragile, bone-dry relic. Your skin, pulled taut over your prominent skeleton, is the color and texture of old, dark leather. Your eyes are sunken deep into their sockets, and your lips are drawn back, giving your face a fixed, serene, yet utterly unearthly expression. You are not a corpse. You are a mummy, a perfect specimen of ritualistic preservation. The monks approach cautiously, performing the visual inspection. They check the body for any signs of collapse, slippage, or decay, a crucial part of the process. If the body had toppled or shown significant signs of decay, the process would be deemed a failure, and the remains would be quietly reinterred or consecrated according to a different rite. But you are seated perfectly, a silent, unmoving monument to your spiritual will. The quirky tidbit that the monks look for during the inspection is the condition of the skin on the palms and soles of the feet. Due to the extreme dehydration and the prolonged lotus position, The skin in these areas often takes on a particularly hard, almost petrified quality, sometimes cracking slightly like baked earth. This was seen as a sign of extreme spiritual discipline, a physical manifestation of the complete drying out of the body's worldly attachments. Your hands, resting in the mudra, are dry, stiff, and utterly inert. Historians still argue whether the monk's decision to declare a Sokushinbutsu a success was based purely on the physical condition of the body, or if the ritual required a subjective, spiritual affirmation from the abbot or the community. It is likely a combination. The body had to pass the technical test of preservation. No decay, preserved posture. But that physical success was then interpreted through a profound spiritual lens. The successful zazen posture was proof of the monk's transcended will. As they lift you gently from the chamber, your body is found to be astonishingly light, a mere fraction of your original weight. The water is gone, the fat is gone, and the internal organs are shrunken and hardened by the poison. You are moved to a temporary, sacred space within the temple grounds for the final cleansing ritual. You realize, with a final, chilling note of sarcasm, the ghost of a light joke, that all the extreme diets, cleanses, and workout routines of the modern world pale in comparison to this 3-year, 0% body fat routine. Well, I officially look like I died doing CrossFit. The thought doesn't even have enough energy to be funny, but it is true. The final act of preparation begins. Your preserved body is dressed in new, ceremonial robes. The dirt and dust of the chamber are carefully brushed away. You are no longer just a monk. You are the physical manifestation of the Buddha's eternal body. The unsealing is over. The veneration is about to begin. You have passed the test of the earth and the flesh. The unsealing is complete, and the final journey is realized. Your desiccated form, perfectly preserved in the lotus posture, is no longer a body. It is a Sokushinbutsu, a living Buddha. The horror and the suffering of the long preparation are now entirely superseded by the profound spiritual triumph of your success. You are the ultimate relic, a physical, enduring manifestation of the possibility of enlightenment through the mastery of the flesh. Your preservation is so complete, so profound, that it instantly elevates you beyond the status of a mere deceased monk. You are not a corpse to be buried, but a holy object to be venerated. The monks carry you in solemn procession from the temporary inspection site to the main temple complex. The air, which had previously held the anticipation of dread, is now thick with the scent of incense and the hushed reverence of the community. The mainstream historical fact that solidifies your legacy is the public display of the Sokushinbutsu. Your body is enshrined, typically placed in a glass case or behind a protective barrier in the main hall of the temple. This is the culmination of the entire, grueling ritual. You are now the physical embodiment of Miroku, the future Buddha, who will awaken and guide the world. Pilgrims travel from across the region, and eventually from across Japan, to gaze upon your perfectly preserved form, drawing spiritual strength from the palpable proof of your dedication. Your presence transforms the temple into a major pilgrimage site, a place where the eternal truth of the Dharma is physically manifest. You are no longer referred to by your birth name or your monastic name, but simply as Sokushinbutsu-sama, the honored living Buddha. The quirky tidbit that often surprises outsiders is the process of your post-mortem sartorial change. Your original, rough woolen robes, worn down by years of asceticism, are replaced by layers of fine, new robes, often dyed in rich, deep colors. But these robes are changed frequently, sometimes annually, or upon the request of a generous donor. This ongoing, meticulous dressing and undressing of the preserved body is a continuous act of service and veneration, treating your remains not as a stationary object, but as a living, breathing, eternally present spiritual figure, requiring daily attention and care. You are forever caught in a loop of sacred, unchanging fashion. As the years turn into decades, your story and the sight of your unmoving form become woven into the fabric of regional lore and practice. You are a silent teacher, a permanent reminder that true spiritual liberation requires the complete conquest of the body's most fundamental demands. The larger, unresolved question that surrounds your state is the final, essential debate. Historians still argue whether the success of the Sokushinbutsu was ultimately a victory for Buddhist asceticism, validating the extreme discipline of the Shugendō tradition, or if it was the triumph of NT, empirical, natural embalming science. For the faithful, the answer is inseparable. The rigorous scientific outcome, the mummification, is proof of the profound spiritual power, the enlightenment. Your successful mummification becomes the ultimate, tangible evidence that the will of the monk can override the laws of biology. Your legacy endures despite the efforts of the central government to ban the practice. You recall the historical fact. The Meiji government, during its modernization period, formally banned Sokushinbutsu and all forms of ritual self-mummification in 1877, declaring it a form of ritual suicide. This ban meant that those monks who entered the final chamber after this date risked having their bodies exhumed and treated as ordinary corpses rather than sacred relics. Your success predates this ban, cementing your position as one of the last and most genuine examples of the practice. You are a silent monument to an era of extreme religious devotion, a human being who transformed his own final moments into a permanent act of grace. The light joke is long, long gone. All that remains is the cold, preserved truth. You are the embodiment of a vow fulfilled, a permanent resident of the temple, witnessing the passage of centuries from your silent, meditative posture. Your eternal stillness offers a powerful, unnerving message to every person who visits, that the body is merely a temporary vessel, and that true persistence is found not in living, but in letting go, completely and permanently. You are the ultimate embodiment of the teaching of impermanence, paradoxically achieved through an act of permanent preservation. Your final, silent sermon will continue for as long as the wood of your temple stands and the pilgrims come to kneel before the living Buddha. You have made the transition. You are the relic. You are eternal. The cold stone beneath your perpetual resting place is silent now. The chanting of the monks has faded, replaced only by the gentle sound of the wind moving through the ancient cedar trees outside the main temple hall. Your journey, the years of starvation, the agony of the poison, the terrifying darkness of the final chamber is over. All the effort, all the pain, has settled into the profound, unchanging peace of eternal preservation. You feel nothing now, only stillness. The vast, slow, quiet motion of the centuries passes around your unmoving form. You are anchored to the earth, a steady, calm presence in the ever-flowing river of time. The lights of the temple are dimming, the last embers of the incense are dying down, and the world is settling into its deep, peaceful sleep. There is only the silence now, a silence you have earned through the ultimate act of will. You are safe, you are still, and you are finally at peace. Let the silence guide you toward your own restful sleep, far from the shadows of the old mountains.